So, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Elisabeth Ward. I am the Executive Director of the Los Altos History Museum. And I want to start this evening by respectfully acknowledging the Muwekma Ohlone people on whose ancestral lands the museum is located. The Muwekma people have stewarded this land throughout their generations, and their historical relationship with the land continues to this day. We are honored to have received greetings from them on their traditional homelands of Thamien. So we are here tonight to talk about how we honor our own past through the preservation of historic homes. That's one of the avenues that we have to try to preserve our past. And the Los Altos History Museum is always excited to have an opportunity to have conversations about our own local history and how we can share our stories that connect us to our land and help us all feel part of one another's community. The City of Los Altos is not only provides us a venue for museum operations, and they help support the museum. We are very grateful for our relationship with the City of Los Altos, and we're very grateful to have a city staff participating in tonight's program. Tonight's program has been put together in honor of May as Membership Month, and that is sorry. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, my phone rang. May is Historic Preservation Month. It is also Membership Month here at the museum. So the Los Altos History Museum is a membership organization, and if you are not a member, certainly we encourage you to consider becoming one. It is something that helps our community share our stories and keep our history alive. So you're all welcome to become museum members. And okay, so I'm going to see, I bet this is somebody that was trying to get into the webinar and didn't have the link. Sorry about that phone call interruption. I am just delighted to have an opportunity to have a conversation about the Mills Act. I did not know much about it before I started in this position here. I had worked at up in Washington State, and I had worked at the Smithsonian in Washington, DC, and I just never heard of the Mills Act before I came here to Los Altos. People were talking about it as if everyone should know what it is. And I thought, oh, I need to learn more about it. So I have been trying to keep my ears open and learning as much as I can about the Mills Act. We had the opportunity to do, we had a Mills Act homeowner that was doing some research here at the museum. The museum does make our archives available to anyone who would like to come do some research, and we're happy to receive research requests. So that got my wheels turning for putting together this program. And then I discovered that we have on our own city staff here in Los Altos an expert on the Mills Act. So we're going to start the program tonight by hearing from Sean Gallegos, who is in the planning division of the City of Los Altos. He is also I'm going to get the term wrong, the liaison to the Historical Commission, and is just somebody that we know has a passionate interest in history and historical preservation. So Sean, you can unmute yourself, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the Mills Act, history of it, and then we're going to open it up to a couple of homeowners that have gone through the Mills Act process here in Los Altos. And at the end, we definitely, one of the reasons we're doing this in meeting format is so we can also have a conversation. We know there's other Mills Act homeowners that are joining us tonight, and we look forward to a lively conversation towards the end. If you would like to ask questions during Sean's presentation, there is a chat function down at the bottom, and I certainly encourage you all to use that during his presentation, although I don't suppose Sean would mind being interrupted if there's something burning. So thank you all so much for being here this evening. The Los Altos History Museum is proud to be able to bring some attention to May as Historic Preservation Month.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Sean Gallegos. I'm Associate Planner with the City of Los Altos. I'm also the liaison for the Historical Commission. Tonight, Let me see if I can get this to move. Here we go. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Mills Act, some of the original intent and history of it, and how it's applied here locally. So the Mills Act is a historic preservation tax incentive legislation that was enacted by the state legislature. It is legislation that we do see both at local, state, and federal government levels. The intent is to incentivize and encourage historic preservation through tax relief. And while there's been considerable
Sean,
analysis, yes.
are your slides supposed to be showing right now?
Oh, they didn't show? Let me try it again.
I mean, unless I was the only one who didn't see them.
No, we were getting just a blank screen.
There we go.
Is it going now? Okay.
Yay, we've got it. Yay.
Yay. Okay.
Sorry.
What is historic preservation tax incentive programs are important for local governments, state, federal, to provide incentives for property owners to pursue restoration of their structures. Let me see if I can get this to move. Here we go. So the Mills Act at the local level or at the state level was created in 1972 by the California legislature and Governor Reagan at the time, SB 357. The act itself permitted cities, local jurisdictions, counties to create historic preservation contracts. At that time, the intention was to allow for restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of local, state, and federal historic properties. Part of the original legislation was that it required public access to properties and it required 20-year contract terms. Right after the Mills Act was approved, the State Board of Equalization found that the Mills Act was unconstitutional due to the legislature lacking the authority to enforce it. And as a result, the state legislature brought forth a proposition in 1976 that was a constitutional amendment which granted under the Revenue Taxation Code the authority to the legislature to enforce some of the restrictions under the Mills Act in regards to historic properties. In 1985, the California legislature amended the Mills Act. Part of the intention in amending it was due to some of the restrictions in regards to public access to properties and the 20-year term. There weren't a lot of incentives for individuals to pursue historic preservation. And so the state legislature in 85 clarified the definition of what is a qualified historic property, reduced the Mills Act term from 20 years to 10 years. They voided the requirement for public access to qualified historic properties. And then they simplified the tax assessment of historic properties. In 93, the legislature again further modified the Mills Act, requiring, of course, consistency with the Historic Preservation Code, requiring compliance with the State Office of Historic Preservation requirements, and then also tying improvements to historic properties to the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, Department of Interior, which is kind of a standard for rehabilitation of historic structures. Yes, Elizabeth? Dr. Ward?
Oh, did we miss slide 4? And I feel like we might have missed even slide 2 where you talked about the
did it
history of it.
Did it slip? Oh, it's moving very quickly. Sorry about that. Slide 4, here we go. Let me see if these, here we go. Okay. So, so the Mills Act offers a tax incentive program to support rehabilitation. Again, it limits contracts to a 10-year term. In return for the reduced property taxes, property owners are required to use the savings for the maintenance, preservation, and restoration of historic resources without diminishing the historical integrity of the resource. In addition, they are required to undergo quinennial or every 5-year inspections of Mills Act properties. Again, as a requirement, property owners are required to comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards requirements. After a 10-year term of a Mills Act, the agreement does not in effect expire. the property owner or local agency automatically renews it, and it continues on an annual basis as a self-renewal of the original contract. As part of the, if an owner does petition agency to terminate a Mills Act, property owners must pay up to 12.5% of the current market value of the property, with the value being determined to the county assessor. So there is a significant penalty in effect for Mills Act properties once they terminate. After, in regards to terminating a contract, of course, there is a due process right for property owners. And so any jurisdiction that is looking to terminate a contract, there is a requirement for public notice and public hearing for a local agency to terminate a contract, either for breach of contract, or if the property owner has allowed the structure to deteriorate or has failed to comply with their overall maintenance program. So let's see if I can get this to move again. Sorry. So the Mills Act, one of the major incentives for property owners is it provides a significant tax incentive, and that incentive supports the rehabilitation of structures. Historic properties, and Jon Baer may speak about this, is quite expensive in regards to rehabilitation. And it allows the cities to enter into these contracts and provides tax reductions that allow owners to subsidize the cost of rehabilitation. Now, what I have in the table on the screen is the first table is how, of course, everyone knows current assessment is done for most standard non-historic properties that are not on Mills Act. If you have a property that's $3 million, you have a tax rate of 0.01202 in Los Altos, and you have a tax bill of $36,600. How the Mills Act calculation occurs is it's based on the lease rate value of the property. And so the county assessor's office will determine the lease rate of a rental property based on similar properties. So for instance, if the property was at $5,000 a month, which is typical in this community, $5,000 to $7,000 a month, over a 12-month period, it would be $66,000 in overall revenue, gross income. You're able to subtract less expenses, which would include insurance, repairs, utilities. You'd have a net income of $50,000. That would be divided by a cap rate that would be established by the county assessor. Typically, it's 13.66%. And so then your assessed value would fall to $366,000. And that would result in a new tax of $4,400 and a tax savings of $32,200. Now, generally, what the city is aware of, we see a 40 to 50% reduction in overall taxes for property owners who do pursue a Mills Act. Some of the outliers, of course, have to do with the lease rate. That is established by the county. That is not information that's readily shared with the community, and the cap rate, which can change from county to county. Oh, let me go back. So at the local level, there are multiple organizations that help support historic preservation, including our local historical commission, the city council, our county board of supervisors, and their historical commissions. Private and nonprofit historic preservations, including the History Museum, who's a partner of the Historical Commission. The City of Los Altos does require Mills Act to comply with the statutory requirements of the state, which does require contract terms of 10 years, a 10-year rehabilitation, restoration, and maintenance program that is tied directly to the percentage or the amount of savings that a homeowner is receiving from a tax reduction, and inspection every 5 years. And as part of that, at the every 5-year period or every 10 years, the city will require proof or documentation that the homeowner has undergone restoration or has complied with their maintenance program. Now, qualifying properties is established by state law. Qualifying properties are privately owned properties which are not exempt from property tax exemption, and which either follow certain requirements. They're either on the National Register, or they're part of a local historical district. They're listed in a state, city, county, or municipal register of historical or architecturally significant properties, places, or landmarks. In the city of Los Altos, there are 82 historic resource properties and 22 landmark historic properties, and all of those properties qualify for the Mills Act, consistent with the state definition for what is a qualified historic property. The part of the process is a two-step, it may be a three-step if you count staff. It requires a submittal of an application to staff, to the city, for a Mills Act designation. Part of the city's longstanding practice is the city does not assess fees for historic properties in regards to entitlement applications. And so it'd be the submittal of a formal application to staff. That would include the general application, historic resource evaluation, and then updated DPR forms. DPR forms are state Office of Historic Preservation forms that clarify the parameters that qualify a structure for historic designation. And it's a particular practice that has to be followed for any property. So that is submitted to staff. Staff prepares a report, and it's submitted to the Historical Commission. The Historical Commission provides a recommendation to City Council, and then that recommendation is taken to Council, and Council will be the final decision-making body. If they approve a Mills Act designation, they will authorize the city manager to execute a Mills Act agreement with the property owner. And part of that agreement includes the maintenance program that will be tied directly to that, and it will require the every 5-year inspections of the property.
That's easy. The 5-year maintenance is easy.
So, so some of the concerns regarding historic preservation, especially Mills Act designation, that you hear about in the public sphere is a concern regarding the impact of having a historic property designated, having a property designated as historic, or having a property part of a Mills Act designated process. And there's a concern overall that being historic or being a Mills Act has a detrimental effect to the overall value of a property. And so there are academic studies that have been completed in regards to the Mills Act, in regards to real estate values. One was done in the city of San Diego, and it captured sales data in regards to single family homes. They looked at, and that occurred between 2000 and 2005, captured 2,251 houses. 35 of them were Mills Act agreement properties. And the study found that having a property that's part of a Mills Act designation does appear to incentivize owners to preserve their properties. And the conclusions from the academic study was that the desirability of historic structures are increased despite the costs and restrictions of Mills Act or historic designation, and that they do see an overall increase in the value of historic properties. And this is just one example. There are multiple academic studies that have evaluated historic designated properties that have found that historic designation alone does not result in decreased overall property values. And it's an ongoing question that we have as staff members at City Hall, and we try to convey that information to the public if we can, even though it's not part of our direct role. In regards to Mills Act properties in Los Altos, we have a total of 14 properties that are Mills Act properties. Some of our initial properties were in 1989, and then all the way through to 2019. One of the things to note, of course, is the initial date of the first Mills Act property, which is in 1989, which if we go back to my previous discussion, It wasn't until 1985 that the state eliminated the requirement for access to properties and eliminated the requirement for a 20-year term. Part of the reason why the state went back and modified that was because property owners were not interested in being part of Mills Act designation because of the severe restrictions in regards to access and in regards to the terms and conditions of the previous Mills Act original legislation. And so that allowed and triggered a lot of access to Mills Act designation. So when I reached out to the Office of Historic Preservation, what they've advised me is the state is not really actively managed or tracked the number of Mills Act properties. However, what the State Office of Historic Preservation has found is that 91 cities and approximately 1,662 properties have Mills Act agreements statewide. That's as of 2019. According to the Santa Clara County Assessor's Office, there were 331 Mills Act agreements in 13 Santa Clara County cities. And that was again of 2018. And in reviewing that data, 8 of those cities had a median of 4 Mills Act properties. And while the city of San Jose had 76 Mills Act properties, Santa Clara had 149, Mountain View had 22, and Gilroy had 15. And so Los Altos has 14 properties. So we're doing much better than the median, but not as much as some of these other cities. However, most of these other cities are populations greater than 150,000, and they have a greater real estate inventory. This concludes my presentation. Of course, once we finish, if anybody has any questions, please provide them in the chat or raise them with Elisabeth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. So now we're going to ask a couple of homeowners to tell us a little bit about their process of going through the Mills Act restoration, what it motivated them to want to seek this designation, and what the process was like for them. And so we're going to start with, this is Daniel's property, I do believe, correct? So you can go ahead. Do I need to ask you to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about, and I think Sean has, you have a couple of other images also, so.
Yeah, well, actually, if you'd like, I can share some of my screens and kind of like some of the pictures.
You have some pictures, okay.
To describe. So yeah, if you, if I think Sean stopped sharing, or if you stop sharing, then I can share my own screen. But well, before I go in, I just want to thank Sean for great help with going through the Mills process. He was extremely helpful and really guided me through the whole process. We bought this property in 2015, and let me just kind of start sharing some of the pictures. So the house, it's on Grant Road, and we were actually the second owners of this house. So it was originally a farmhouse on an apricot orchard that extended all the way from Grant Road all the way to Highway 85. So it was a huge property, and it was built in 1913 by a Holt family, and so the original owner, I think he probably it was in the same family for some time, but like one of the original owners, he died in about in 1960s, and since then they kind of subdivided the house into 2 parts. So you can see there are like stairs going up. So it was a rental property for a very long time, where like the top was kind of a separate apartment from the bottom. And as you can see from the picture, when we got it, it was in a pretty kind of dilapidated state. So it didn't have any like modern heating, like any central heating, and then the plumbing and electrical was like from 1940s probably. So it really needed kind of this full renovation, so to speak. And then you can see that the original wood shingle, it like especially here at the back, it was very, very thin, and it kind of needed replacement. So we we engaged in this full renovation process for the property, but the biggest item that we realized, like the biggest issue with the house, which we didn't fully like estimated the problem with it, is the fact that it had the brick foundation, and the city, like the building department, they didn't allow us like to fully reinforce it and to kind of to build like, let's say, like a wall around the brick foundation. So basically the only way to get rid of the brick foundation, to fully kind of make the house stable in case of the next big earthquake, was to like fully remove the whole brick foundation and then lift the house and then kind of build out a concrete foundation around it. So we definitely didn't know what we were kind of stepping into when we purchased the property. But once we kind of went down that path, there was no way out. The good part is that we decided also to dig, like, since we were gonna replace the brick foundation, we also decided to dig out a full basement, so that at least the money that we're putting in, there will be some kind of additional value to the house as opposed to just new foundation. So this is how it looked. And then so let me just kind of look at the next. So this is how it looked before from the front, kind of when we just started the renovation work. And you can see that the challenges were that we had this beautiful stone veneer in the front, and we were supposed to like truly preserve it because it was all historical. And then also we had this brick stairs that we also had, well, basically, because we had to live the house, there was no way this brick stairs could be kind of there. So we actually had to like take almost like very, very detailed like pictures of it and draw how it was done. Like we had the historical architect there present, and then we had to basically remove all these bricks and then put them aside. And then we had to rebuild them all again. The same thing with all the stones. So you can see that this is the original stones, and then you'll see how like we also had to remove it very carefully one by one, label them, store them aside, and then put them back. So this is kind of when the process was starting. And I just want to also to note kind of this darkened stained wood, right? The wood shingle. So like part of the preservation that we did was actually like at the back we replaced the wood shingle, but here at the front I power washed it, so which made it like much more prettier. So you like the picture that we saw originally was kind of in this more restored way. So this is kind of kind of the halfway process where you can see these brick stairs removed, and then like part of the stone veneer also removed. But of course we try to preserve as much as possible at the top of that stone veneer. So but yeah, you can see kind of this hole under the foundation, and then this is the inside. Basically under the house, what had to happen is that we had to bring, like, we had to support it on these rails, and then we had to bring a bobcat, and you can see kind of this little scratches in the dirt as we were trying to dig out the earth in between, while at the same time putting in this brand new concrete foundation that's made up to the latest building code standard. And yeah, so and then this is kind of where you can see that the house was really standing just purely on this support. And I recall my contractor praying every day that we won't get any large earthquake when this was going on, because otherwise the house would have just collapsed on its side, because it was just really supported by this piers. And then yeah, this is kind of the side of the house. Again, you can see that it's partially already work started to be built. And then this stone veneer where it was preserved as much as possible, but then it was restored again. But luckily, it took us some time. It was quite painful, but this is how it it looks pretty much right now, or immediately after the foundation. So you can see that the stone veneer completely fully rebuilt. We had a very professional mason do it, and then we had a historical architect who had to supervise this work from beginning to the end, and she had to sign off on a separate report. And then the brick foundation was rebuilt using original bricks that it was built with, and it looks exactly the same as it was before. And yeah, this is kind of how it looks right now. So additional work that we've done on the house, well, apart from all the interior iteration, like changes that I'll be happy to show if you guys are interested, is yeah. So we power washed the whole house. We repaired, basically we replaced some of the shingle that was really old, and then just this year I hired a special person to stain, like restain all the house. So all the shingle needs to be restained. So you can see actually, like our lights, they're covered by this paper. So that's where they were actually doing the restaining. And then we also repainted all the frames, all the window frames, like these eaves, and basically like all this exposed wood. And then actually during this painting process, the painter realized that we also have the termites in the house. He saw some dropping, so we're gonna, in the end of June, we're gonna put the house under the full kind of that umbrella or whatever it's called, that covering, and we're gonna have a full work done on the house. But yeah, in general, it was meaning we just kind of enjoy right now having the house fully renovated and being at a showcase of historical Los Altos house. It looks very beautiful. We're proud to have it on Grand Road so that people can see it when they drive around, and we'll definitely continue, to take good care of it.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Wow, that's fascinating. That was made my palms sweat just to see your whole house on these piles of stone holding it all up. So yeah. Very, very brave process. And so it took, this was like 4 years you've been doing this? How long?
Yeah. So we bought the house in 2015. We got the permit in like May of 2016. So it took us, some time to go through all the different reports we had to produce. And then we started work in the summer of 2016. And yeah, it took us 3 years. We finished in October of 2019. So yeah, between like the purchase and when we moved in, it was 4 years.
Wow. And did you anticipated it would be a Mills Act property from the beginning? Did your real estate agent talk to you about that?
No. She didn't talk about it at all. Actually, where I learned about Mills Act is, there is this real estate company called De Leon Properties, and they give us this in the mail. They give us this little magazines every other month. And it was in that magazine that I read about Mills Act. And I'm like, oh, wow, this looks like a very interesting thing to explore. And since we had to hire a historical architect just to go through our initial renovation process to, so I've talked to her about it and said, yes, sure, you can do that. And then it kind of started the whole.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm glad you found out about it. Definitely, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. We are having a request, Sean, to maybe pull up again that full list of Mills Act properties, if you are able to do that. And while he's doing that, I'm going to queue up our next presenter. Has pre-recorded his message, and then we'll ask Duco to tell us a little bit about his. But I'm going to share a few minutes of what Jon Baer has done with his property, and that's sort of pre-recorded. But I'm going to have us listen to the bit of it. Is that right? I think, John, you're not with us, are you? I'm supposed to show your video, I believe.
I am on audio, but not video. So, Elizabeth, if you don't mind running the video, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
And I will be available for any questions.
Okay. Great. Okay, and then so I'm going to go ahead and share. Oh, Sean, are you able to, do you know that slide, the one that just has all the properties? That was a really interesting list, and maybe it's something that we can even mail out to people, or.
Would you like me to share it or after Jon Baer's?
Yeah, maybe after Jon Baer's, we'll return to that. That sounds great. Thank you, Sean. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and queue up this. Oh, wait, sorry. Yes, okay, there we go.
Good evening, I'm Jon Baer. I'm a homeowner in Los Altos who owns a Mills Act property. And I'd like to take you through a little bit of our experience with Mills Act. Let me share a screen here. And we can get started in a second. So again, Jon Baer, my wife and I bought a property in Los Altos 25 years ago. We have Mills Act. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our experience. And the bottom line is, when it comes to historic preservation, the Mills Act is a carrot that actually works. It's a win-win for the community and the homeowner. And I'll take you a little through that, our experience with Mills Act, and specifically our property. Our house was built in 1906. There wasn't much in 1906. Los Altos didn't even exist. And the people who built our house, Margaret and Marvin Adams, bought 30 acres, built a relatively immodest home, very large for its era in Los Altos, and had apricot orchards. It was a working farm. This is their tank house and the drying racks where the apricots would dry after they were harvested in the summer. Los Altos, as you all may remember, was actually not founded until 1907. And once it was founded, property was selling. And don't we all wish we could buy land in Los Altos for the prices that were listed in 1907. Like many people who bought land, in this case 30 acres, the Adams did several years after they purchased the house begin an effort to subdivide the land. And today the houses that exist between San Antonio and Eleanor, Lyell and Hawthorne are what consisted of those original 30 acres of land. Keep in mind, in turn of the century, when you're told your kids to go out and play in the driveway or on the street, this is what they did. Dirt roads surrounded by apricot trees. These are two of the Adams children. Marvin Adams Jr. actually was born in Los Altos, grew up in Los Altos, and died here in the mid-1970s. The house continued to be a home. There were changes made in the ensuing years since the subdivide of land. Those two palm trees in front were actually, when they were planted originally, no higher than waist high. A front porch was added, and the original enclosed porch was, when the house was turned into apartments, turned into a bathroom and a kitchen. You'll notice the widow's walk at the top of the house. That widow's walk is actually not original, if you remember the earlier picture of the house, and it was put there after a fire in the 1920s damaged the roof, and instead of fixing the roof properly, they put plywood, made a flat roof, and put a widow's walk. And for the next 90 years, 70 or 80 years, the house leaked on a regular basis. And that was one of the things that we did to bring the house back to the way it was after we purchased it. So as you will see, we had plans, and yes, the house doesn't look a lot different now than it did in 1906, but in fact, that was our goal. Our goal was to really make the house look like it looked as closely as we could on the outside, and then make the necessary changes inside to make the house a place for a family to live and raise a family. And we accomplished that. We finished the house in 1998. That's a picture of the sunroom that again was walled over at one point. The house has a plaque on it, courtesy of the Historical Commission in the city. We, in fact, are city landmark #1. So a little more background and history of the house. Margaret and Marvin Adams purchased 30 acres of apricot orchards in 1905, 1906. They actually began construction in July 4th of 1906, and by mid-October of 1906, they were done. That's rather remarkable, given that the earthquake happened in April, and there was a keen shortage of materials and labor, and yet they were able to finish the house in a few short months. It was a relatively large house for their family as well as their servants. 2 main stories, an attic for servants and a basement. Compare and contrast that with the Gilbert Smith house, which is more typical of houses of that era. As I mentioned earlier, there was a plan to subdivide the land around 1911. The actual first subdivision didn't occur until what we believe is 1919. And some of the parcels of land didn't actually sell until well into the 1950s. Believe it or not, lots of people were not clamoring to live in Los Altos for those early years. Our house was turned into apartments during World War II. 1, 2, 3, 4 apartments. And then it was purchased in the mid-1970s by a developer who wanted to tear down the house and turn it into condos. That plan was rejected. The property was instead subdivided. And the people we bought the house from in 1976 turned the house back into a single-family residence. That near miss was the basis for historic preservation in Los Altos, and the city became the first city landmark #1. We purchased the house in 1997, and it underwent extensive renovation and restoration. At that point, the house was almost 100 years old, and it was frankly pretty well worn. Everything was in need of repair or replacement. But our focus was keeping or bringing back many of the historic details while making it a home to raise our family. While the house was already a city landmark, we applied for Mills Act prior to the beginning the actual renovation work, and we were luckily granted Mills Act. So what did we do to the house? We often get that question. People who visit, who pass by say, doesn't look like you did anything. And frankly, for us, that's the biggest compliment we can get. But in fact, behind the facade of 100-year-old windows and siding and charm and character, there's new plumbing, electrical, HVAC, insulation, floors. We turned a walled off room that had been a kitchen and a bathroom into a sunroom. We restored the cut off hips on the roof. We did the garage, put on a hipped roof on that building and siding so it would match the house. We rationalized the interior to meet the needs of modern families with enough bathrooms and closet space that really weren't part of the house's original design in 1906. We did a very modest extension off the back of the house. Yes, those changes were done. They met with Secretary of the Interior standards, and very often people are not aware of the fact that you can make modest changes both to the envelope of the house as well as the interior, and still meet the requirements for historic preservation and landmark status. The key to this was hiring professionals. We had an architect with a deep understanding of historic architecture, and more importantly, a willingness to work within the rules. That included things like custom milled redwood to match existing woodwork on the exterior of the house, custom milled woodwork to match the interior. And none of that is cheap, but it helped us keep the house both on the outside and on the inside consistent with a 1906 house. This wasn't an easy effort. We spent a lot of time, did a lot of research, but we feel it was well worth the effort. We're very pleased with how the house turned out. And we got tremendous support from the historical and planning commissions, the city staff, as well as the city council through that effort. And we are really very grateful for that.
We are gonna let John kind of join in a little bit when we go into our discussion mode, but that's a little bit of his process. And then I think we also want to leave some time for conversations about the pros and cons of the Mills Act. And I'm hoping John can share some of that in person, but if not, I will continue with the rest of his video presentation. But first, I'd like to ask the Duco and Lori to tell us a little bit about their house. And did you have some photos to share as well? So I can make you.
Yeah, I do. Let me pull up my screen.
All right, I will make you guys. There you go. All right, so please tell us a little bit about your home and how you found out about the Mills Act.
Sure. Let's see, allow Zoom. Trying to figure out.
Oh, where the share screen sign is there?
Yeah, hold on.
If you're on an iPad, it might be up at the top.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay. I know Sean also has a couple pictures of your property that he queued up just in case.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Right. Sean, do you want to, or what do you think, Duco? Are you finding it okay?
You know what? I might have, let me try this 1 second. I need to dial in. Give me 1 second to.
Okay, well, go ahead. So Sean, in the meantime, do you want to pull up a couple of pictures from their property? Oh, it's blank screen again, Sean. Oh, okay. Lori, you want to start talking?
Can you see it now? Is it fine?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Let me try this again, guys. This is a new computer, so I need to reset some preferences. Can you see my screen?
Okay, there we go. Yes, we can.
Yay!
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
All right, let me press play here. All right. Hey, so first of all, thanks to Daniil and to Jon for their presentation, because I love seeing I love hearing the stories, love seeing the pictures, and there's a lot of overlap with the project that Lori and I did. So I'll go through fairly quickly. I have a couple of pictures that kind of show where we started, where we ended up, and then a little bit about the process, and then some key thoughts at the end. So let me jump into it. So our house is called the Wideman House. We're at Yerba Buena. We're Historic Resources 80. We're a craftsman house built in 1911. We bought it in 2013. So we also worked with the historic architect. She dug up kind of this article from 1906 where Mr. Wideman, who ran a clothing store in Palo Alto, was being described as a go-getter after the earthquake, and he was moving his shop to a tent, which reminded me of the COVID year that we just went through. But he was part of the family that built our house, and they finished it in 1911. So we're number 30 on the list. We also have the plaque, like John showed, 1911. We displayed with pride on the front porch. So one of the three buildings on our property is the tank house or the water tower. The sketch from 1974 on the left is something that the previous owner actually passed on to us. The picture on the right is how we bought the property. So that's the tank house, the water tower. This is the picture of the original main house. This is when some of the overgrowth was removed, and this was the barn. So those are the three structures that we purchased on this property. This is what it currently looks like from a scene from the street from Yerba Buena. So the house to the left, the main house is to the left of the path. What was originally the barn is converted into garage, is to the right of the path. You see it by the driveway, and in the back you can see the tank house or the water tower. So this is a picture taken from the backyard. So the water tower or the tank house had been converted to a guest house. We actually met some of the folks that used to live in it during the 60s. This is the back of the main house, our patio. Here's some pictures of what it currently looks like on the inside. And John was describing how they restored a lot of things back to 1906 and try to stay very true to what it was like. We did a blended approach. So what you can see here is the original fireplace of the house, and that will come back later when I talk about kind of the process of actually moving this house. But it was an original brick fireplace. You see all the original wood. Some of it we had to restore to the same point that John made, finding the right wood to kind of blend in with the old wood. We kept all the original cabinets as seen here. We kept all the original box beams, which you can see here, and then the typical craftsman pillars that we have on the side of our living room, which that side we've turned into a music room, as you can see from the piano. Then we have another part of the house that we carried forward kind of the theme of the box beams, but it has a distinctly more updated feel to it. So this is our modern kitchen. This is our dining room. But we still carry forward the kind of the themes of use of a lot of woods, and then kind of the craftsman style type of box beams and beautiful use of wood just in general. So that's what the house looks like right now. I'll talk a little bit about kind of the process that we went through. So I wanted to explain not only kind of the renovation details, but also kind of the schedule that we went through. So this schematic shows kind of Yerba Buena Avenue on the top and San Antonio to your right. Our neighbor is number 2, we are number 10, and then on our other side is number 32. This house that we bought is very similar to the story that John told earlier about the 30 acres of land that the original owner purchased. Wideman purchased 10 acres of land, and that was surrounding kind of these 3 buildings, and that made it such that the house actually was facing towards San Antonio. So what we did is, so this is our property. We first renovated the barn and the water tower. And after that was done, we actually lived there for 2 years while we renovated the house. So like I said earlier, the house that we renovated was actually facing San Antonio, because the driveway actually came from there. That was the original layout of the house. And in 1967, what now is number 2 Yerba Buena was actually the front yard of this house, but was parceled off and sold. So the house that we purchased had this beautiful front porch that was about 8 to 10 feet from the fence, from the neighbors, and definitely not aimed in the direction that the architecture was originally intended. So what we did after we renovated the barn and the water tower and renovated the house, we picked up the house, moved it to the back of the lot, and just like Daniel was describing, we dug a big hole and put a proper foundation underneath, and then we moved it back. And like Jon was describing, actually within the rules, you can make some minor changes, some modest changes to the footprint of the house, and we did something similar. So that's kind of the process that we went through. And Elisabeth, you were asking Daniel how long it took his project. We were in about the same time frame from start to finish, from actually first shovel into the ground until moving back in to the main house was about 3 years. So I have a couple of pictures of what that all looked like. So this we also had to scrape the foundation underneath the barn and the water tower. So we did the same thing as what Daniel was describing. You lift it up, you scrape it out, you pour concrete underneath, and you put it back down. We lived next door in the main house before it was renovated. So with our young family, we had the opportunity to enjoy the whole process from up close. Lori even had some of the school class come by when the house was actually bolted from the original foundation and when they started to move it. So it was a fun process that many people were able to enjoy with us. This is a picture of that fireplace that I showed earlier. Holding up the house with a very big stack of bricks and stones was not a trivial undertaking. So the beams that you saw in Daniel's project, you also see it in our project. So this was the basement that was being dug while the house was being kind of held up high at the back of the lot. This is my daughter looking down into the basement, and those crates that you see in the basement look awfully familiar, Daniel. But that seems to be the way these things are done. This is as they started the process of rolling the house back over the basement with my youngest daughter standing underneath, and then this is kind of where it all ended up. After many years of going through the project. So very, very fun. But I want to talk a little bit about the experience that we had and the importance of some of the things that Sean was saying. And I also really like what Jon was pointing out, where for this group, I really appreciate all the work that you guys put into kind of preservation of the history of Los Altos. And then because it's Preservation Month, one of the things that I think cannot be underestimated is how incredibly hard this process is. And now in hindsight, it's easy to talk about it, and I think Daniel and Jon both speak with pride of the project that they have gone through. But I don't think we can underestimate how incredibly hard it is. So from that perspective, I think the 4 aspects that make it hard, I just quickly wanted to step through it. The first one is the money piece. Jon highlighted it, and Daniel was talking about how he ran into surprises of like the brick foundation and the stone veneer, how you deal with all of that. All of this stuff costs a tremendous amount of money, right? And for people that buy new houses, they have to choose where they're going to spend their money. And if Los Altos can create an environment and a kind of a local culture where at least the financial support through things like the Mills Act make it extremely conducive for new homeowners to bring a lot of excitement and so their hard-earned money to these projects. I think it will continue to be an extremely fun thing to see happen in our community. So so the Mills Act helps tremendously with that. So money, I think, is an important consideration in preservation. The second thing is the amount of time that this whole process takes. Right. So Daniel was saying from buying the house until being done is 4 years. I think it took us longer than that. But the support that we got from the city, Sean, from you and from Zach, was very important. And making sure that all those process, all those steps that can be taken and all these approvals can be received in time, again, lowers the barrier to actually convince people that this is a worthwhile undertaking. The third thing is energy. Like I cannot believe how much work goes into this and how much attention to detail is needed in order to do this right. And Jon mentioned getting a good group of people around you to get this done. Very important, but it still requires a lot of energy on the owner's part to do this. So getting support again from the city and Sean, I know you've put a lot of people in contact with resources that can help with getting all this done is extremely important. And then the fourth thing, I picked a heart to represent passion and just in general appreciation for the history and the preservation that can contribute to the history of Los Altos, because without passion, you cannot bring the energy and you cannot kind of justify the amount of time and money that you spend on this. So making sure that we encourage people that are either current homeowners or future homeowners in our community to do this, I think is very, very important. And from that perspective, I think things that the city does, like we received the 2018 preservation award for this project that we did, and it might be kind of a silly thing to highlight, but I cannot tell you how much we appreciated this. Not only getting the support from the city while the project is going on, but even after it's done, getting recognized. And Elisabeth, you reaching out for an opportunity to talk about kind of our project. It takes a lot out of somebody's life, and being appreciated for the work you do is really, really important. So in closing, the City of Los Altos has been huge for us. Mills Act, of course, for kind of sponsoring us in this endeavor, extremely important. And Sean, you're great. It's a homeowner does this once, right? So it's a completely new exploration for the homeowner. But having somebody like Sean being able to hold your hand through the process is extremely important, and therefore is very helpful for our community that wants to preserve properties like that. So thank you very much. That's what I prepared, Elisabeth.
Thank you, Duco. Thank you. That was perfect. Stop. There we go. Seeing everybody again. Yeah, that was. I like the illustration with the money, time, energy, and of course passion. So and I think that absolutely was part of the idea is that you of course it's a labor of love for you, but I do want you to know how much we appreciate it here at the History Museum. I know Gary Hedden is the board president. He does bike tours around the historic homes, and it adds so much to our community to have these architectural treasures preserved, and the amount of energy that you all put into your homes, and your 10-year commitment you're making to that, and the possibility for the next homeowner to come on. So I realize we're at the hour mark here, and we've been able to answer a few questions, but I know that, originally we thought we might talk a little bit about the pros and cons of the Mills Act. And I was wondering if anyone wants to just make any comments about their process with it, anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak, or otherwise, yeah, or any other questions you might have. I'm sure Sean would be happy to answer any questions you might have too, if you are considering going in through the Mills Act property process. So, and Sean, actually, I might just start by asking you, my understanding is that you could apply for a Mills Act at various stages in it. You can either get the designation before or you can do it afterwards. Can you tell me a little bit about the original law and the original intention?
So the original intention was to provide a tax incentive so that individuals can utilize that funding for development or for rehabilitation of a structure. And so that's been the common practice, is usually individuals apply for a Mills Act, they provide us a maintenance program, and based on that maintenance program and the amount of tax incentive they're receiving, then over a period of 10 years, they spend that money based on the plan that they have proposed. What we've seen more recently is because of sometimes the conditions of these older homes and the need for the rehabilitation that has to occur, is that a lot of the work is having to occur, in effect, we're calling kind of front-loaded, where all of the work is occurring at one time within a very short period of time. And so we've been trying to find a way to accommodate that. Some of that is by, I think, Yerba Buena, and I think maybe Daniil's also at 1365 is trying to amortize the cost over the life of the elements of the structure. So for instance, if they put in a whole new foundation, that's like a 75-year lifespan potentially. If they put in, and so if the cost of the foundation was $1 million, then it's $1 million over 75 years. Same thing for each of the other elements. And then they provide us a breakdown. And so every 10 years, we will then update it based on those finances. So, you know, we've kind of been hit and miss with council in regards to support for amortization. I think council at times believes that it's inconsistent with the intention of the Mills Act, which was to provide funding for rehabilitation, not to provide funding after rehabilitation. So, so what we've been trying to do now, as we're trying to pivot to some of the council's concerns, is when a homeowner is interested in doing something like Duco did, is before they start that process, is to pursue the Mills Act at the very beginning. So before they go down the path of rehabilitation, that they develop their plan, we go to council in advance, and then we get the tax incentive that starts from day one, and then from that, then they can then use that tax increment kind of incentive to pay for that from the very beginning. And we're hoping that's more consistent with the original intent of legislation and more consistent with council's belief of its intent. And so that's the path we'll be taking. And so when we hear from homeowners that they're interested in rehabilitation, staff or myself, I try to advise them that's the process, so we can try to use that in the future.
So they won't be doing it like Daniil did, just finding it in a magazine somewhere and going, oh, this is helpful. It's just incredible to hear about the amount of work that is required on these 100-year-old properties to really make them livable and habitable for modern families. And also really interesting how many of the properties had been sort of subdivided into apartments, or, you know, people had done these sort of odd renovations to it for the time that made economic sense then, but doesn't really help with the historic character.
I would say too, I mean, you're not always limited to physical structure. A perfect example is 220 University, the Getski's home, previous to Getski's home. Their Mills Act designation also allowed for landscaping to be part of that, because a lot of the original home in the site, very significant site, and the overall landscaping costs were very significant. And a lot of the vegetation and trees were original to the structure that was there. And so it made sense to allow for maintenance of landscaping to be part of it, since it was original and more historic also. That's not common, because many of the sites we have were originally part of orchards. And so the original orchard land has been degraded or it's gone. And so we don't always have that opportunity, but with the 220 University site, we had that opportunity, a lot of significant trees, and we thought it was important to try to assist them to preserve those.
When a Mills Act home is sold to the next, what happens then with the Mills Act designation, or do they continue to have that obligation to maintain the home as a historic property?
So the Mills Act designation runs with the land, so it continues in perpetuity until the homeowner or the city cancels the contract.
Mm-hmm. But it's renewable every year.
So you have a 10-year contract, and at the end of the 10-year contract, unless the homeowner attempts to cancel the contract or the city attempts to cancel, it turns into an automatic annual renewal. It automatically renews. Wow,
wow. So wonderful. Okay, any other questions? So Marcia Adams asks if, how authentic you have to be about the roof. So she's asking here about going from wooden shake to an artificial shake roof. And I don't know, not sure who would know that. Let's see, perhaps Sean,
So, as part of this process, or especially when it comes to rehabilitation, we follow the Secretary of the Interior standards. And as part of that, if you are interested in updating or changing a material to a structure, we ask for a historian to weigh in regards to that potential impact to the integrity of the structure. Typically, normal maintenance doesn't really have an effect on the historical integrity of a building. However, if it's directly tied to the architectural style, then staff will ask for a letter. Usually those letters are relatively short, but we do need that letter to provide clarification to staff, since we're not qualified historians under the National Park System's kind of requirements.
Mm-hmm. So it really depends on the look of the artificial shake and then a historical architect's opinion about how closely this affects the overall integrity of the home. Right? I
mean, if a property owner is typically going from wood shingle to a composition, it's usually not problematic as long as the composition shingle has a similar form and shape to the original material. And there are lots of examples of materials out there. They would just need to reach out to staff with their proposed roof material, and then myself as the historical liaison would look at that material and advise them.
Wonderful. Great. That's a good question. Yes, I think it's always worth considering. So let's see. Now, I know we are sort of at our time here where we've had a really good conversation about this. I know that Jon had also, in proposing the title for tonight's, the carrot and the stick approach, and if it's a carrot that actually works. So it sounds like from the examples that we've heard tonight, it's at least working for Los Altos right now in terms of it's seeming to be picking up momentum. Sean's list shows, more and more properties heading in this, not a lot, but still where it's picking up steam. So it seems to be working for Los Altos right now. But I was wondering, do you think, Sean, it has a bright future? Are you expecting more Mills Act homes to be coming down the application line?
Yeah, I do believe so. I mean, I think, the whole question about the carrot versus the stick, I mean, when part of the discussion was I did an academic paper on the Mills Act, and part of it was really a discussion in regards to the intent of legislation and whether kind of some of the constraints and rules that the legislature has set on it had actually accomplished the overall objective, which was the preservation of historic structures. And, I looked at 3 particular cities, Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Gilroy. And one of the things that I learned, and it kind of applies to most jurisdictions, is that there clearly is a lack of policy direction from councils from city to city in regards to direct oversight of Mills Act properties. And so you really see less of a hand from staff and council in many times managing historic preservation on individual properties. But that doesn't mean that these properties are degrading in any way, because all of the surveys that I had done on the 3 other cities really concluded that without city having a carrot effect on kind of making people comply, they didn't really require the city to do that, because the individual homeowners themselves, because of their affinity for historic structures, because of their love for historic properties, naturally preserve the structures themselves. And so all of the properties that I saw, of the couple of hundred properties I saw, all of them complied with their maintenance programs with limited oversight from the city. And so you know, though I think it's beneficial that the city have more involvement in the process, because it's our obligation when we establish city policies or state policies, the owners themselves are being very successful even without city involvement at times. And that's from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It seems to be the same. And it's the same for our city. So.
Well, I think we had some great examples of that tonight, of just, you know, that this is something that homeowners are passionate about, and really working so hard. And I think the Mills Act serves to demonstrate that it is something that the state of California values, and then Los Altos, by enacting it here locally, it shows that Los Altos values it. And we appreciate that as a gesture of how much it adds to the community to have these historic structures. They add so much character, they add such much individuality, and they really help connect us to our place and to our stories, and to the land itself. And it's just really wonderful to have these glimmers of the past amongst our neighborhoods. And I know I drive past, every time I drive past 10 Yerba Buena, it brings a smile to my face to see all the work you all have done. And we're going to end just on an up note here, Sean. We have a question from somebody who says, what are the first steps for getting my house on in the Mills Act process if it's already on the historical registry? So yeah, go ahead, Sean.
The first step is to schedule an appointment and just talk to me. It's probably the first step is to have a conversation with me, so I can talk to you about what we may need from you and to talk about the property. That's probably the very first step, and is probably the easiest step initially in this process.
Well, yeah, because we can all see how knowledgeable and nice you are, Sean. Thank you for being a great representative of the City of Los Altos. Thank you for joining tonight's panel and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you to the homeowners. Your photos just blew me away, and kind of said I wasn't sure if you guys, and then you came through with fantastic photos. So I can see how much you love your homes and you love the process you've gone through. Thank you all for being here this evening. The Los Altos History Museum is so proud to be a part of this community, and we thank you for your time tonight. I'm gonna stop the recording now.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Sean.
Hey,
Thank you.
Elizabeth,